Hello, and welcome to the Grief and Loss Wellness Session. My name is Charlene Payne, and I'm the Regional Mental Health and Addictions Coordinator with Western Health Mental Health and Addiction Services. This session is one of a series of wellness sessions offered by Mental Health and Addiction Services. These sessions are aimed at providing you with information as well as resources on a variety of topics. So today's session is on grief and loss, and I thank you for joining. The topics to be covered in today's session include talking about what is grief, as well as some stages of grief, what is expected in the grieving process, various tasks of grief and grieving. I will also talk about grief during the holidays or other special occasions. And we will also talk about some supports and resources available if you need further supports. So the purpose of today's session is to provide you with education and skills and to help you determine if more services are necessary. Grief and loss is very difficult, and it's always a struggle. It's not necessarily measured in time. It's different for everyone. We are all unique individuals, so our response to grief is also individual to the person. And grief can only be healed by you. It is important to remember that everyone grieves differently. We often want to experience grief or loss going from point A to point B and to be done with how we feel. However, the grief process is not linear, and different events or songs, people, places, or different things can trigger our grief at any time and impact our grieving process. So this is how grief actually works. There's no straight line. Things will come up in your life, things will happen that may trigger our grief. And so there's no real straight line to go from that point A to point B. Each person's grief journey is unique as a fingerprint or a snowflake. And I really like that quote because, again, it pinpoints the differences between individuals and how we all react to grief and loss. And when I talk about grief and loss, it's not necessarily grieving the loss of a loved one. It can be the loss of a pet, the loss of a relationship, the loss of a job, moving to different locations, finding out or discovering a diagnosis of a chronic illness. Any of these major life events can still cause a person to go through this grieving process. There are what we call some various stages of grief and loss, and I will talk about those now. Normal functioning is our basic day-to-day living. And then when we experience a loss, and again, it could be any type of loss, these are the following stages that we tend to go through. We may not necessarily go through these stages in order. We may go through various stages at different times and not necessarily in this order. So first we have shock or denial. And this follows usually immediately after a loss has occurred. People may experience a period of numbness, fear, anxiety, confusion, blaming. and feeling that this is not really reality, that this is not really happening. So some may describe it as feeling like they're sleepwalking. You know, this is not really happening. So that shock and denial is there. So avoiding the issue as well. Another stage is anger, and this is where the person may feel a lot of frustration, irritability, feel shame or guilt, anxiety, or a sense of embarrassment about feeling the anger. Depression and detachment is another stage, and this is where people feel very overwhelmed, feeling very helpless, feeling that they have no energy or no interest in things, just feeling like having the blahs, you know, just not feeling like themselves and not wanting to do things. Dialogue and bargaining. So this is where you may start to reach out to other people, wanting to tell your story of what happened and struggling to find a sense of meaning for what has happened. So why did this happen? How did this happen? I don't understand. Maybe I could have done something different. Feeling a loss of control over our emotions as well. We then may move into acceptance, and this is where you're starting to explore some options that you may have. Where do you want your life to go next? So looking at making a new plan, things that you may want to do, things that you may want to get involved with. So accepting that the loss has occurred. And then the next stage would be returning to a more meaningful life again. So this is where you are regaining a sense of meaning in your life, a sense of purpose, empowerment, security, self-esteem. So you're acknowledging that the loss has occurred and acknowledging your need to move forward and to move on. And everyone experiences these stages in different ways. And again, you may not necessarily begin with shock or denial. You may, experience other stages and then go back to anger, for example. So again, as you see, it's not necessarily a straight line through these stages and phases of grief. So you may experience moments where you don't dwell on the loss and you can focus on day-to-day tasks. Your hurt is never completely forgotten, but it takes its place among other life demands. Deeper friendships may be formed through the process of sharing, so when you're in the dialogue or acceptance phases. And you may have a new awareness of life and of the value of people and experiences. So when you experience feelings of once the shock begins to wear off and your feelings come alive again, when you experience maybe the anger, depression stages, you kind of feel a sense of disorganization in your life. So symptoms in this stage could be shortness of breath, extreme fatigue, tightness feeling in your throat. And this is a painful time, but it's also a normal and necessary part of the grieving process. So you need to allow yourself to feel those things. I'd like to share a video with you now called Yielding to the Season of Grief.
When a loved one dies suddenly, something within us dies as well. Walking through our grief will heal our broken hearts.
After a sudden loss, your world is thrown into such a tailspin that you often feel like you're going crazy.
Something has died within you. Life will never again be the same.
Grief is disorientation. That's why they say it's like losing your mind. People would ask, how do you feel? I feel like someone's opened up my chest with a meat cleaver and there's a cold wind blowing.
You have to learn to live without the person who has been part of your life. When it's the death of a child, it's the death of your future. When it's the death of a parent, it's the death of the past. When it's the death of a spouse, it's the death of the present.
His physical absence was like a phantom pain in a limb that was no longer attached.
Grief is as natural as eating when you're hungry, drinking when you're thirsty, sleeping when you're tired.
It's a process, it takes time, and there's no design. On Monday, you'll feel this way, and on Wednesday, you'll feel that way, and on Friday, you'll be 2 chapters ahead of where you are on Monday.
Grief seeps into every pore. Like a giant, it overshadows everything you do, everything you say, everything you feel.
Grief is like a wave or a series of waves. Grief rolls over you and overwhelms you.
Feeling like you're not going to make it through it. Feeling like you're never going to find hope again. Feeling like you're going to be depressed for the rest of your life are all extremely normal parts of grief.
It was all too much to bear. There had been no single road that had brought me solace. Each day I meander within, trying to find a place of peace or respite from it all.
If you just let the moment be what it is, this is a really hard, lousy moment right now. If you're just honestly saying, okay, it is what it is. And then the next time it comes, you say, I experienced this before and it didn't kill me. So I'm going to let it happen again. And bit by bit, you're able to yield to the season of grief. And I think if you don't yield to the season of grief, you don't get beyond grief.
It will not last forever. I promise you. I've been there. I've been in a place where not only did I not know if I was going to survive, I didn't know if I even wanted to survive.
Grief is nature's way of healing a broken heart.
So that was a video that really sums up the process of grief. Next, I want to talk to you about some common myths associated with grief and loss. So one myth is that people sometimes view all losses as the same, and that's not necessarily the case. As the video describes, the loss of a parent is a loss of your past, the loss of a child is the loss of your future, and the loss of a spouse is the loss of your present. So not all losses are the same. Another myth is that all bereaved people grieve in the same way. And again, remembering that it's unique to the individual because we are all different. So we all grieve in different ways. Another myth is that it takes 2 to 3 months to get over your grief. And there's no time limit to the grieving process. So the view that you should be over it in a few months is not true, is not factual. Another myth is that when grief is resolved, it never comes up again. But as I mentioned earlier, anything in your life can trigger a memory, can trigger something, and that grief is brought back to the surface again. So it can come up at any time. You have no relationship with your loved one after death. And again, this is not true. You can still maintain a relationship in terms of the memories that you share with that person. Another myth is that crying does not solve anything. Crying actually serves a purpose. Crying helps our bodies release any emotions that are built up within us. It is best to put memories in the past and move on. So it's not necessarily important to push memories of our loved ones in the back of our minds. We need to honor memories and work through them in order to move forward. The intensity and length of your grief are a testimony to your love for the deceased. So this is a myth as well, because even if someone does not express their grief in intense ways or for long periods of time, that does not mean that they love their loved one any less. So the length and intensity does not determine the amount of love you had for the deceased person. Children need to be protected from grief and death. Again, this is another myth, because we need to communicate this natural process of life to our children. They will have questions, and it's okay for them to see you emotional, to see you going through your grief, and to shelter them can sometimes give the message to them that it's not okay to talk about, and it's not okay to express feelings of loss or of grief. So we need to involve our children. It is best to stay in control and keep that stiff upper lip. So again, that's another myth, that we don't always need to have everything together. We don't always have to maintain that level of control or put on that strong or happy face and pretend that everything is okay. It's okay to have breakdowns. It's okay to express your emotions and let them out. The only people who think there's a time limit for grief have never lost a piece of their heart. So take all the time you need. So that's a quote as well. So just some key points in terms of understanding the grieving process and grief and loss is to understand that grief is individual. It has no time limit. Everyone grieves differently. Everyone needs support. It's okay to ask for help. Everyone needs a sense of compassion and understanding. And everyone has felt some form of grief or loss. No one is immune to grief or loss. So here are some things that you can expect in the grieving process. Your grief will take longer than most people think. Again, there's no time limit. It can take months or even years for some individuals. Your grief will take more energy than you ever would have imagined. It drains our energy levels. And your grief will involve many changes and will continually be developing. Your grief will show itself in all parts of your life, psychologically, socially, physically, spiritually. All parts of ourselves will be impacted by the grief and loss. Your grief may also resurrect any old issues, any unresolved feelings, or unresolved conflict from your past. So it may bring up some things that you didn't really deal with in the past, maybe may come to the surface again during your grieving process. You will feel anger and guilt, or at least some manifestation of these emotions. So you will feel anger and guilt, or at least some parts of it. Your grief will entail mourning not only for the actual person, but for any hopes or dreams or unfulfilled expectations that you held for and with that person, as well as the needs that will go unmet because of the death. So you grieve not only for what you have already lost, but for what you have lost for the future. So again, any plans, expectations, hopes with that person. So you may have a combination of anger and depression as well. So irritability, frustration, may become easily annoyed or intolerant. Some common feelings associated with grief, and looking at, are my feelings normal? So these are some common feelings that you may experience. Sadness, of course, is the most common feeling, and this is usually accompanied by crying. Anger. This can be one of the most confusing feelings, and it usually is the root of many problems in the grieving process. It can come from two sources: feeling a sense of frustration that there was nothing we could do to prevent the death. Also a sense of regression, so feeling lost and unable to exist without our loved ones. So that's the root of some of the anger that can be experienced, and again, this is quite normal. Guilt, again, can be very common, but is usually irrational. So feeling somehow that we were responsible, or maybe we could have done something differently to prevent the death. So feeling responsible somehow. And anxiety is another common feeling, and this can range from mild insecurity to severe levels of anxiety. And often the anxiety stems from not really taking care of ourselves. Some other common feelings would be, again, loneliness, fatigue, and this could be, again, from lack of sleep, not really taking care of ourselves, a feeling of helplessness, what could we have done, feelings of shock, and this usually occurs after a sudden death or loss, a sense of yearning, and this is normal response to loss as well. For some people, they may experience feelings of relief, particularly if the loved one has suffered. Most always may see this with loved ones who have chronic or terminal illnesses, and you feel that sense of relief that they're no longer in pain and they're no longer suffering. And some people experience numbness. So sometimes a lack of feelings is so emotionally numb. And this can sometimes occur because there are so many different feelings to deal with. So we block all of those sensations and feelings as a way to protect ourselves, as a defense. So those are some of the common feelings associated with the grieving process. But there are also some common thoughts. So again, a sense of disbelief. I can't believe this is happening. Confusion. Our thinking gets very confused. Again, this trying to understand and make sense of what has happened. Preoccupation, and this could be an obsession with thoughts about the deceased person. And some people experience hallucinations, and this usually occurs within a few weeks after the loss. So feeling that we've seen our loved one in the home. So different thought patterns usually mark the experience of grief. We also experience and go through some behaviors during the grieving process. So again, some people really struggle with sleep. So either sleeping maybe more often than usual, having nightmares or dreams, waking often throughout the night, having a hard time falling asleep. So different changes to our sleeping habits. Also experiencing appetite changes. So some people would eat more than usual, other people would not eat as much as usual. So an increase or decrease in our appetite. So looking at, are you an emotional eater? Do you eat more when you're trying to manage difficult emotions? And are you restricting eating because you just don't feel up to eating? Absent-minded behavior, so easily forgetting things. So where did I leave my keys? Social withdrawal, so not wanting to be around many people, so withdrawing yourself socially. Avoiding reminders of our loved ones or what we have lost. Searching, restless overactivity, so trying to keep ourselves very busy so we don't have to think about the loss. Crying. Some people treasure objects that belong to their loved one, or visiting places or carrying objects that remind you of your loved one. Some people can also experience what we call complicated grief. And this is where a person may move beyond the typical, or I quote, normal stages of grief and loss. So some indicators of complicated grief would be the persistence of denial. So this can be, again, denying that the loss has occurred. And it could also include absent grieving. So you're not going through some of the typical feelings or stages that we've already discussed. Medical illness can also be another sign. So you're developing, certain medical conditions. Depression. Depression can go along with lower self-esteem, maybe thoughts of suicide or self-harm, and impulses with self-destructive behavior. So risk-taking behaviors. Progressive social isolation. So you're isolating yourself more and more, making excuses for not going out with friends or with family members. Persistent anger and hostility, and this can lead to paranoid reactions, especially against those involved in the medical care of your loved one. Or sometimes it can be suppression of any expression of anger and hostility. Continued disruption in normal patterns. So again, not doing things you used to enjoy doing, again, accompanied by a sense of loss or grieving. So you're not grieving in the typical patterns. And again, you may have some hyperactivity in terms of keeping yourself busy. Continued preoccupation with memories of your loved one to the point of searching for a reunion. We also sometimes can see conversion of symptoms, and this would be similar to the symptoms of the deceased person. So if your loved one was suffering from an illness, you may begin to experience similar symptoms as your loved one. Most people, if they are experiencing complicated grief or traumatic loss, may require further supports and professional supports in terms of counseling or support groups. So grief is like the ocean. It comes on waves, ebbing and flowing. Sometimes the water is calm, and sometimes it is overwhelming. All we can do is learn to swim. And I really like this quote because grief is very much like the water and like the ocean, very unpredictable. And all we can do is really learn how to surf those waves or ride out those waves and the storms, because we cannot control the ocean. All we can control is how we respond and react to it. So all we can do is learn to swim, surf, or ride those waves. Some of the tasks of grief, and I will talk about each one in more detail. One is to accept the reality of the loss. The second, to experience the pain of grief. 3, to adjust to the environment in which the deceased is missing. And 4, to find a new normal, to acknowledge the value of your relationship, yet allowing yourself to move forward. In the beginning, again, it's accepting the reality is during the shock stages. Disorganization, you face, experience, and express grief-related feelings. So you're working through any emotions that come up during the grieving process. And then it's reconstruction. So you adjust to a world without your loved one's physical presence. So the first one is accepting the reality of the loss. So asking yourself, what are the things that are difficult in accepting reality? It could be things like listening for footsteps, waiting for them to come home from work or school, expecting the person to call or text or email, hoping there was a mistake and it was all just a dream or a nightmare. So ask yourself and think, what are some other difficulties that you have had in accepting the reality of your loss? So with acceptance comes the need to be, there needs to be a complete understanding that the loss has occurred. So this is where our intellectual, or our head realization, and a deep emotional or heart realization. So that's our mind. Intellectually, we know that the loss has occurred, but oftentimes our heart does not agree. So it's that usually they're out of sync, the head and the heart. So what needs to happen with acceptance is to bring a sense of balance. So our heart and our head understanding and accepting that the loss has occurred. So some normal grief reactions in this stage is again yearning or searching, and again denial. And this low intensity, short-lived denial is quite normal. So reflection activity, so thinking about the following. This is designed to help you remember all the qualities of your loved one that made them unique, that made them different. Embrace all that they were. Forgive them for all that they were. And love them for all they were. Because again, no one is perfect. And sometimes in the grieving process, we tend to only focus on the good memories or the good things about our loved ones. But it is important to think about them in all of their parts, in all that they were. So even thinking about things that used to annoy you about that person, or things that, you used to maybe disagree about. Because it's important to remember and love our loved ones for all that they were in all of their parts. So reflect on each of these things about your loved one. What are the things that you miss most about your loved one? It may not always be positive things that you miss. It can be other things as well. This will help you in terms of understanding and accepting the reality of your loss as well. The second task of grief is to experience the pain of grief. So looking at what feelings have you experienced? Did you experience feelings of anger or guilt, sadness, anxiety, depression? Once you acknowledge the feelings that you have experienced, then you can look at ways that you can cope with and manage that emotion and that feeling. Feelings can be hard to name for some people. So looking at what we call a feelings wheel or a feelings chart can be helpful. So and in the center are our core feelings of fear, anger, disgust, sadness, happy, and surprise. And stemming from each one are other words to describe the anger. For example, could be feeling threatened, mad, aggressive, and then withdrawn, infuriated, furious, enraged, insecure, hurt. So looking at feeling wheels can help you figure out what emotions you have experienced, and then looking at ways you can cope with them. So I always remind people that all emotions and feelings have a purpose, and feelings are neither right nor wrong, or good or bad. We need to allow ourselves to experience the painful feelings associated with grief in order to move forward. Another quote, "No one ever told me that grief felt so like fear." Because again, there are a lot of insecurities, a lot of unknowns. People keep telling me that life goes on, but to me, that's the saddest part. So even the idea of moving on with your life or moving forward without our loved ones can be very saddening as well, and difficult. So being able to work through our feelings, no matter what they are, is very important to moving forward in the grieving process. If you're unable to do so, it may keep you stuck in the grieving process for quite some time. The third task in the grieving process is to adjust to an environment in which the deceased is missing. So looking at external adjustments. So in each family, every person has a role within that family unit. So looking at what that person did in the household. So who is doing those tasks now? What roles are not yet filled? And what do you miss the most? So it's looking at addressing the many changes in your life now that your loved one is no longer with you. So who is going to take out the garbage now? Who is going to be responsible for paying the bills? So there's many different things in terms of adjusting to that physical environment. There are also some internal adjustments, because the loss of a loved one does affect our sense of self. Again, you feel that a piece of you may have died as well. So looking at, in what ways does the grief affect your self-confidence? How has it impacted your sense of self and self-esteem? If you are feeling helpless, is it possible to remind yourself that this is normal? It's okay to feel this loss of a sense of who we are on the inside. There are also some spiritual adjustments, because often our assumptions about the world are shaken. So in experiencing your loss, how have your beliefs or values been shaken or changed? So all of these adjustments, internally, externally, and spiritually, are important to help us adjusting to an environment in which our loved one is no longer with us. Accepting a new normal is the fourth stage. And we always, refer to this new normal because, again, our life is not necessarily going to go back to the way it was before. It's adjusting. It's, accepting our new way of living, our new way of doing things. So what are ways that we can remember the richness of a person's life? How can we remember our loved one? And as you move through the painful feelings and challenging issues, life can take on a new meaning for you. So as you work through adjusting to a new norm, new environment, adjusting and working through your feelings, your life can start to take on a new sense of purpose or meaning. So what are fun times that have happened since your loss? And in what ways are you still struggling and are still difficult for you? Asking yourselves these questions can help you in terms of accepting a new normal, a new way of living. Rituals are actions done in a purposeful way to symbolize something much more than ourselves. So rituals can give us a sense of purpose and action and connect us to something else. They can give us peace and help us to feel grounded. And they can often provide us with order in times of chaos and confusion. Because grief is chaos. And this is when we need rituals the most. So creating your own rituals can help you to remember your loved ones and to work through grief in a safe and constructive way. So there are a variety of ways that people can create rituals, things like lighting candles, creating a scrapbook or a photo album of your loved one, planting a tree in memory and watching it grow, new life, carrying something that reminds you of them, or hosting a memorial event. So these are a few examples of rituals that you can do to keep and remember your loved one. It's important to remain open when deciding about rituals, and you need to do what feels comfortable for you. Include only the people that you want to be involved in this process or ceremony, and continue your ritual for as long as you need. Again, we're all different, and you take all the time you need in performing your rituals. So just to review and summarize the tasks of grief, so to accept the reality of the loss, so knowing the deceased person is no longer alive and will not physically be a part of your everyday life, to experience the pain of grief, experiencing a variety of intense feelings and working through them as a part of the grieving process, to adjust to an environment in which the deceased is missing, so struggling with the many changes as a result of the loss, including the practical aspects of day-to-day living and the effects upon your sense of self and your perception of the world, to emotionally relocate the deceased and move on with life, so acknowledging the value of the relationship with your loved one, yet allowing yourself to get on with life. The next session I would like to talk about is grief during the holidays. And while Christmas time seems to be very difficult, I also would remind you that any special occasion, birthdays, anniversaries, any other holiday throughout the year, any time that you shared quality time with your loved one can be very, very difficult to deal with. So it's important to learn some skills and techniques that you can use to help you get through those challenging times. So this first quote, I ask you to try to understand that time or season does not change the pain. I want to smile and laugh, to enjoy the holiday cheer, but sometimes I just need the space to shed some tears. It's important for you to be direct during these difficult times. So if you don't feel that you can go somewhere or want to be a part of something, you need to let your friends and your loved ones know. You need to be firm and communicate your needs to your loved ones. Making a new tradition. So finding a new ritual that includes the memory of your loved one so that you can still incorporate them into the holiday in a new way. So this could be done in hanging special ornaments on your tree or hanging something in your window. Letting someone in. So let someone know that this time is very difficult for you and that you may need to talk about your grief and your feelings during this time. So again, you don't always have to put your happy face on. You need to let people in to your world and your feelings. Having an exit strategy is also very important. So if you do decide to participate in a social activity or a family dinner, drive yourself to these events. This way you can have a sense of control over when you leave without having to feel pressure to stay or wait for a ride. So having that exit strategy is helpful if you are struggling in those situations. It's okay to cry. Again, crying will help release the built-up sadness or anxiety over keeping the sadness in. So again, the more we try to contain or block away our emotions, the more harmful it is for us. We need to allow those feelings to flow through our bodies, and it's okay to cry because crying will help release that built-up energy within. Because emotions are like energies in our body. And in order for us to be healthy, we need to allow that energy to flow naturally through our bodies. So it's okay to release that. Sometimes it can be helpful to continue your loved one's ritual. So if they enjoyed taking a drive and seeing all the Christmas lights, continue to do that. Whether it's a walk down the street, going to church, continuing their ritual may be a healing process to you as well. So coping with grief during the holidays, find ways to remember your loved one. Make time for yourself. Give yourself permission to say no. Change some traditions. Do something for others and express your feelings. It's important to help keep your center during the grieving process and the holidays. So don't isolate yourself. Isolating yourself magnifies our sense of pain. So this does not mean putting yourself with anybody you can find. A sense, of discernment is required, which can be challenging. We need to put ourselves in the presence of people who care and who understand and who aren't going to try to rewrite history for us or tell us how we are supposed to be feeling. Asking for help. Again, you don't need to do this alone. While it sometimes isn't easy, it is most certainly harder to get through grief and loss alone. Asking for help and getting it is perhaps the strongest indicator that a person will be okay. So looking at support groups for grief and loss or bereavement groups, counseling, or small therapy groups can be a huge benefit for people. Do only what you can do. So maybe you don't want to go to that office Christmas party, so don't. You are the best judge of how much you can handle. If the holidays are overwhelming you, create your own celebration at home with a close friend. During overwhelming times, doing less is more. So make sure you get lots of rest, sleep, eat healthy food, and give yourself lots of timeouts. Watch out for mood-altering substances. After a loss, it can be very tempting to overdo it with alcohol, cigarettes, food, work, shopping, gambling, other substance use. So any compulsive activity prevents you from feeling your feelings. So it's a way to avoid managing your feelings. The addictions are merely a symptom for what's going on underneath the surface, which is not wanting to feel the pain of the loss. So this is where a therapist becomes crucial in guiding you through your grief. Steering clear of critical people. So you've often heard some people out there may tell you things like just get over it, or other insensitive comments intended to help you see that your loved one's death was merciful, or that it was good that they are no longer in pain, or so on. Please remember that these people sometimes are unaware of the impact of their statements. It's not your job during this tender time to reform them. The important thing is to avoid them. Because that will add to your negative feelings. Most importantly, and above all, is being good to yourself. Remember that grief is a lifelong journey with many ups and downs. Hopefully, with time and support will come healing. Give yourself room to feel whatever you're feeling, and know that there is no normal way to grieve. Every situation is different. It's time to start cutting yourself a break and learning to love yourself now. Self-care is about taking time to care for yourself, and this is extremely important as well during the grieving process. Self-care is essential to our physical, emotional, and spiritual well-being. So some activities can include being outside in nature, being creative, so looking at sewing, crafts, painting, sports, reading, a warm bubble bath, listening or playing music. Any number of things can be considered self-care activities. It's very important to continue to take care of our own needs as well. It's also important to look at who is in your support network. So who can give you a sense of emotional support? So someone you can talk to about things and discuss any concerns or challenges you have. Looking at a moral support, someone that can provide you with a sense of encouragement. Mentors, someone who provides you with a sense of guidance or instruction. Looking at who can be your instrumental supports, so giving you practical supports with transportation, childcare, housework, cooking meals, homework, any number of things. It's also important to look at who can give you a sense of companionship or a sense of belonging. That could be even in the form of pets. And informational support, so who can you go to get positive, accurate information about things. So it's important to think about the people in your life that can provide support and listing the people that can help you and how they can help you. So looking at who is in your informal supports, so family, friends, co-workers, pets, and having a sense of spirituality. And where could you go to seek professional help, such as employee wellness programs, mental health and addiction services, support groups. community organizations, and so on. Mental health and addiction services is a service offered to individuals who may be experiencing a challenging time in their lives. We support individuals who are living with mental health and/or addiction issues, as well as their family members. We provide a range of programs and services, including individual, family, group, couples counseling, services for children, youth, and their families, doorways, single session walk-in service, youth outreach workers, prevention and promotion programs, providing education and awareness in the community, various e-mental health services, online services. So our doorways is rapid access to mental health and addictions counseling services, one session at a time. This is available for youth and adults 12 years and older. While most locations throughout the province offer a walk-in service, some locations provide same day, next day, or appointments by phone. We also have a number of crisis and helplines available. Our mental health crisis line, our crisis text line, that's where you text TALK to 686868. Our kids help phone, channel warm line, and that's a peer support online number that you can contact for supports. Our First Nations and Inuit Hope for Wellness helpline, Newfoundland and Labrador Sexual Assault Crisis and Prevention 24-hour line, our Smokers Helpline, and our Newfoundland and Labrador Health Line 811. We also have a mental health and addiction system navigator. The number is 1-877-999-7589. Our systems navigator helps individuals, family members, and service providers. It also serves as a central point of contact for provincial mental health and addiction services and supports. The systems navigator helps improve the individual's mental health journey by increasing knowledge or awareness, identifying and addressing system barriers, and improving coordination among services, and ensuring continuity of care across our services. So if you're calling from anywhere in the province, the Systems Navigator can help direct you on where you can access supports throughout the province. We also have our Bridge the Gap provincial website, and you can access content on a variety of mental health and addiction topics, which provides advice, inspiration, assurance, or direction for finding additional supports when you need it the most. It's www.bridgethegap.ca, and GAP is with 2 P's. It has a service directory, again finding out what services are available throughout the province, a list of resources, knowledge center, so information booth, and links to self-help and counselor assisted programs. There's also a toolbox on the website which provides you with a number of information, tools, relaxation techniques that you can practice at home as well. Checkitoutnl.ca is our mental health and substance use screening program online. So it's www.checkitoutnl.ca. So this is a fast and free mental health checkup that you can do online. It's anonymous, and it has online screening tools for individuals 18 and older. You would answer a series of questions based on how you are feeling, and at the end you would get results as well as recommendations and key resources on where to go next. So I would like to thank you all for joining and listening to our Grief and Loss Wellness session. Again, my name is Charlene Payne, and I just want to thank you for listening, and remember that the grieving process is different and unique for every individual, but I hope you had learned some things that you can expect during the grieving process, where to go for supports and services, as well as moving forward in the grieving process in terms of accepting the loss, adjusting to your environment, and creating a new way of living and a new life. I hope you have learned something today, and please visit our website, any mental health and addiction services office in your area, any Western Health, Eastern Health, Central Health, or Labrador Grenfell Health regional health authorities for further information. Again, thank you and have a great day.